Hey guys, picture this. You're knee-deep in a dusty attic, the air thick with stale perfume and the whisper of old secrets, when a cracked leather diary slips out of a box with a snap that sounds like a guilty sigh. Yeah, that's the moment our forbidden love story bursts into the light. Before we dive in, smash that like button if you love a good scandal, and drop a comment telling us the weirdest thing you've ever found hidden in a closet. I'm counting on you. Dim the lights, grab a coffee or a glass of wine. We won't judge. And let the glow of your screen be the only thing daring enough to illuminate those cramped, ink-stained pages. You flip open and instantly smell the metallic tang of midnight confessions, the rustle of paper like a lover's gasp, and you can almost hear her pen scratching. If anyone finds this, forgive me. This love was never meant to be. We'll unravel how a shy chemistry major and a rebellious theater kid collided in the hallway of a 1999 high school, swapping mixtapes for love notes, while the faculty pretended to care about test scores, and why every teacher's stare felt like a spotlight on their clandestine rendezvous. So, are you ready to stare down the diary's darkest entry and decide whether some romances are better left unread? In the heart of a village where cobblestone streets twisted like old vines and the air smelled of wildflowers and freshly baked bread, young Alara stumbled upon an ancient treasure tucked in the dusty attic of her childhood home. Sunlight streamed through a small window, casting a warm glow on the leather-bound diary, its spine cracked and pages yellowed with age. This wasn't just any run-of-the-mill journal. It was a relic of her mother's heart, a chronicle of longing scribbled in erratic loops and fervent strokes. As she opened it, the musty scent enveloped her, mixing with the sweetness of nostalgia, and she felt her pulse quicken, as if the diary was whispering secrets meant only for her ears. Little did she know, she was about to dive headfirst into a love story more tangled than her mother's cooking instructions when she tried to make soufflé. As Alara read on, the words unfurled like a dramatic scroll, revealing her mother's soul laid bare. Each entry was a portal into a world where love defied the conventions of their village, a place where families clashed like titans over trivial grievances. The romance was with a dashing boy named Aiden, a rogue from a rival clan known for their sneering jeers and melodramatic flares. She could almost hear her mother's heart racing in those moments, a heartbeat punctuated by secret rendezvous and scandalous kisses shared under the watchful stars. The irony crept in like a sly fox, for in those lines existed both the joy of love and the peril of betrayal. One woman's heart was now a battleground between irrevocable passion and societal rules, a setup more tangled than a season finale of a romantic sitcom. With every turn of the page, Alara felt the boundaries between past and present blur, the diary beckoning her closer to her mother, while simultaneously shoving her toward unraveling the mystery behind this forbidden affair. It was as if she had inherited not just her mother's handwriting, but also her spirit, the unquenchable thirst for adventure, and the reckless audacity to face the unknown. The more she delved into the emotional roller coaster that was her mother's life, the more determined she became to uncover every hidden detail, like some modern heroine in a romantic comedy on an unexpected quest. Perhaps she would even discover the heavenly recipe for love while dodging her family's inevitable disapprovals, fork in hand. Who needed a fairy godmother when she had a mother's love story guiding her through uncharted waters? But the chapters weren't all sunshine and daisies. Alara soon discovered that love wasn't purely the Hallmark card cliché it often paraded as. It was messy, wild, and occasionally smelly, like a teenage boy's gym socks after a long game of dodgeball. Heartbreak loomed over her mother's penned words like an ominous cloud, threatening a torrential downpour. A family feud simmered just below the surface, and with each letter, it was clear that the stakes were equal to a life-or-death situation in an action flick. Alara clutched the diary tighter, feeling a kinship with her mother, both of them daring to dream in a world that deemed their desires forbidden. It was absurdly funny, and yet devastatingly tragic, like watching a rom-com where the characters repeatedly deny their chemistry, only to realize it's undeniable, like how pizza is always the right answer. As she reached the last entry, Alara closed the diary, her heart heavier yet exhilarated. She understood now. Love's path rarely traveled in a straight line, often detoured by societal expectations and rivalries, a romantic game of chess with both players bluffing. The revelations felt like fireworks bursting in her chest, an invitation for her own path of exploration. Determined, Alara decided to confront her own prejudices and tribe's expectations. Much like a hero preparing for a showdown in a climactic blockbuster, little did she know the diary's secret had not only exposed her mother's heart, but had kindled an even bigger adventure ahead. As Alara prepared to write her own love story, one compelling enough to make a bestseller, or at least a mildly interesting film with a happy ending, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow on the small town of Eldridge, Alara flipped through her mother's weathered diary with a heart racing faster than a caffeinated squirrel. Each entry bubbled with secrets and whispers of forbidden love, making her pulse thrumming with anticipation. The faded ink carried the scent of aged paper, reminiscent of afternoons spent in dusty attics, sifting through forgotten treasures. Suddenly, beyond the old oak tree that stood sentinel in her backyard, she caught a flash of movement. There, under the cloak of twilight, was Aidan, a mesmerizing figure with tousled hair and a grin that could charm the dew off the grass. But Alara knew, oh how she knew, that meeting him was like dancing on a tightrope strung over a pit of snapping crocodiles. Their families had penned the unwritten rulebook, complete with 2 opposing teams and an endless supply of bitter rivalry. In other words, her mother would sooner share a dessert with a porcupine than see her daughter cavort with an Ainsley. Yet, something electric sparked between them, a chemistry that could light up a small town's Christmas lights and rival the best buddy cop duos known to humanity. With every stolen glance, they dared the universe to turn a blind eye to the violence of their histories, whispering dreams of adventure and shared aspirations, as if they were crafting a secret language of their own. One moonlit night, Alara and Aidan found themselves hidden beneath a bed of stars in their secret hideout, a forgotten shed that smelled faintly of mildew and nostalgia. The air buzzed with the scent of damp earth mixed with the faint hint of wildflowers, a reminder of spring's assertive arrival even in the chill of dusk. They shared laughter, their voices rising above the rustle of leaves and the sound of crickets composing their nightly symphony. There, amidst the clutter of old tools and shattered dreams, their confessions blossomed wild and free, like the weeds determined to break through cracked concrete. With every word exchanged, Alara felt a profound connection that tugged not just at her heartstrings, but at the very fabric of her identity. The thrill and horror of love caught in the crossfire of family feuds. Yet irony loomed overhead like an unwanted storm cloud, chuckling at their unlikely union. Each moment spent together felt like igniting a spark in a room full of highly flammable materials, and they were wonderfully reckless in their defiance as they spoke of their hopes, dreaming of far-off lands and lives untethered. Alara felt like a heroine ripped from the pages of one of those corny romance novels, complete with smoldering glances and unspoken promises, but with every whispered secret and lingering touch, the specter of familial disapproval hovered like a disgruntled ghost, eager to rain on their love parade. In a town steeped in tradition and grudges, their budding affection was a revolution wrapped in stolen kisses and shared stories, each moment a protest against the chains of their ancestry. The romance unfurled like a delightful plot twist, full of tension and intrigue. Yet the looming question gnawed at the edges of their joy. How long could they keep this secret, this sweet act of rebellion that tasted like forbidden fruit? With every secret rendezvous, every warm smile exchanged, Alara and Aidan danced dangerously close to the edge of tragedy, their love story might just become another lament inscribed in her mother's dusty diary. But for now, as they dawdled under the stars, laughing until their sides hurt, life seemed to pulse with possibility, each heartbeat echoing the thrilling chaos of their intertwined destinies. After all, who could resist a love that felt like it belonged in a cinematic montage? But watch out, because love stories in real life often come with dramatic, last-minute plot twists. Alara and Aiden's love affair thrived in the shadows, their whispered promises echoing against the cobblestone streets like the distant melody of a street musician serenading the moon. Yet, as the ivy-clad walls of their respective family homes loomed ever larger, the thrill of their secret meetings began to wilt under the prickly vines of gossip. Rumors slithered through the air like that lost cat everyone claims they saw, but no one can ever catch, until one fateful evening they jumped from the hushed corners of taverns straight into the outraged ears of their families. The very air crackled with tension, a palpable mixture of disbelief and fury, sending elected emissaries into a spiraled frenzy, armed with pitchforks of indignation and torches of righteous indignation that would have made a medieval mob proud. As the sun dipped low on the horizon, turning the sky into a swirling canvas of fiery colors, Alara found herself ensnared in a web of familial expectations. Her heart thudded against her ribs like a drummer caught in a rocky rhythm, the choices before her weighing as heavily as lead boots, while her family dreamt of alliances with the other households. Somewhere in her heart, she dared to imagine a life with Aiden beneath the vastness of an unclouded sky. Yet, the mounting pressure was as oppressive as an overcooked pudding, ready to burst and spill all its sticky contents across her carefully crafted facade. Each tense meal shared with her family felt like dining in a minefield, where one word could trigger an explosion of anger, suspicion, or pity. A mix she found particularly distasteful. With each passing day, the air grew thicker with accusations flung like confetti during a parade gone wrong. She's lost her mind, and he's a scoundrel, were among the less colorful insults hurled as Alara's heart oscillated between love and fear, a chaotic dance on the precipice of societal ruin. The Shakespearean drama unfolded with all the tragic flair of a high school production, complete with a disastrous scene where Alara's cherished diary slipped from her grasp, landing like a naive dove, just begging to be plucked. The very ground beneath her felt as if it had opened up to swallow her whole. Ensnared by the terrible irony of inking her innermost thoughts, only for them to become the catalyst for her downfall. That diary, once a sanctuary, transformed into a ticking time bomb, poised to unleash the chaos that simmered beneath the surface, threatening to expose secrets far juicier than a celebrity's morning coffee order. The fallout was immeasurable. Voices erupted like fireworks on a hot summer night, igniting the long-held grudges between families that had once feigned civility. A facade now crumbling like an old biscuit, Alara stood at the crux, her heart ablaze with a mix of defiance and dread. Two flames battling for supremacy within her soul. She could practically taste the sharp tang of betrayal in the air, standing in the middle of a narrative spun tighter than an overzealous spider. Aiden's face flickered before her like a beloved flickering memory in a forgotten photo album. And everything seemed at once ridiculous and tragic, like a rom-com gone terribly wrong. In the chaotic aftermath of their world colliding, Alara and Aiden faced the ultimate test of love. They stood like warriors on a battlefield, hearts pounding like the bass of a thunderous anthem, determined to withstand the cacophony of scrutiny. Together, they would have to learn the art of subtlety and courage, navigating the storm with the furtiveness of a cat burglar in a museum filled with fireworks. The air hummed with the tension of thick secrets, and as gritted teeth and simmering tempers surrounded them, a newfound determination bolstered their spirits, just like in every fantasy movie where the heroes face down a fiery dragon. Alara and Aiden knew that to emerge victorious, they would need not only to fight against their family's expectations, but to embrace their wild, reckless love, culminating in a fierce dance with danger that would resonate throughout the ages. Under the vast expanse of a stormy sky, the family gathering took on a dark tone, far removed from the joyous celebrations of past reunions. Tension crackled in the air like static before a lightning strike, as Alara and Aiden found themselves cornered. The smell of roast beef and baked potatoes wafted about, delicious and inviting, yet simultaneously tainted by the bitterness brewing among their relatives. It was here, amid clinking glasses and forced laughter, that the two lovers would face their greatest trial, unaware that their secrets would be ruthlessly thrust into the limelight, much like the uninvited surprise guest who crashes a wedding and promptly spills red wine all over the bride's gown. The stage was set, and the audience of relatives, clinging to grievances passed down like family heirlooms, waited eagerly for the plot twist everyone sensed was coming. As the evening's jovial chatter began to die down, the unwelcome presence of Alara's diary, an innocent collection of thoughts and feelings, emerged like a villain straight out of a Shakespearean tragedy. The first sentence was read aloud, chilling the room as if a ghost had wandered in with winter's frosty breath. Aiden makes my heart race like a sports car tearing down the road. It echoed through the hall, igniting whispers that grew rapidly into a cacophony of indignation. Families exchanged incredulous glances, the excitement of scandal replacing the previous ennui, as Alara's face reddened with a cocktail of embarrassment and anger. It felt as though they were all trapped in a twisted reality show, where the comments section was filled with amateur psychologists critiquing every last detail of their lives. The more they read, the more the flames of ancient feuds danced to life, sparking old resentments that had lain dormant like forgotten winter coats. How could you possibly love him? Alara's father blurted out, his voice booming with disbelief and incredulity. The bitter irony hung in the air like a stubborn cloud. Generations had fought for freedom from these love ties. Yet here stood Alara, poised between loyalty to family and her yearning heart. She felt the weight of her ancestors pressing upon her shoulders like a millstone, heavy with the expectations that had been passed down through the ages, whispering to her like a long-forgotten lullaby. Yet the warmth of Aiden's hand in hers ignited a rebellious fire. The cacophony of voices clashed like swords drawn in a duel, plunging Alara into a tempest of conflicting emotions that threatened to swallow her whole. In that fateful moment, a hush fell over the room like a perfectly timed silence in a blockbuster film, and all eyes turned to Alara, the defeated warrior in a battle she never chose to fight. She stood before her family, heart pounding like the drums of war, time stretching into an unbearable silence as she weighed her options. On one side lay a life bound by expectations, a safe haven where she would never have to fight for love, and on the other, the exhilarating unknown with Aiden, the man who had brought color to her otherwise gray world. With the absurdity of a soap opera dangling before her, she realized that blame could be cast upon the past. Yet it was her heart that would write the story moving forward. And as she inhaled deeply, a daring spark flickered in her chest. She was done asking for permission to love who she loved. Then, with an unexpected clarity that cut through the tension like a sharp blade, Alara squared her shoulders and declared, "I choose my own path." Her voice, surprisingly steady, reverberated off the ornate walls, drowning out the stunned silence. The room erupted, as if a pin had been pulled from a grenade. Some cried out in dismay, while others cheered in rebellion, as the weight of generations clashed with her youthful resolve. Armed with the truth and the undeniable fire of her own desires, Alara stood firm, a beacon amidst the chaotic storm. In that charged moment, she wasn't just fighting for Aiden's love, she was fighting for the very right to shape her own destiny, not like a pawn in an ancient feud, but as the queen of her own narrative. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm, golden light over the village, the air buzzed with an energy both electric and fragile. Villagers stood in clusters, voices rising and falling like the tide, uncertainty hanging like an overripe fruit ready to drop. There was a palpable tension, the kind that crackles when old wounds are laid bare, festering for too long. Alara's heart raced as she stepped into the clearing, her hand clasped firmly in Aiden's, defying the very history that sought to tear them apart. It was as if they were walking a tightrope strung between love and chaos. But they were determined to keep their balance, even if it meant stylin', like a pair of love-struck tightrope artists, juggling flaming torches of family drama, just to make a point. The confrontation had shed light on secrets buried deeper than the roots of the ancient oak nearby. The same tree that bore witness to generations of both love and hate. Alara's fingers brushed against the soft cover of her diary, the very parchment that had whispered long-held truths. It smelled of ink and regret, like a library filled with tales of woe and wisdom. In that moment, a collective realization dawned upon the villagers, each person feeling the weight of their ancestors' grudges. Is this it? They wondered. Are we really going to let age-old feuds dictate our lives like some dreary Shakespearean tragedy? But instead of plotting revenge, the villagers began to engage in a dialogue as rich as the scents wafting from the nearby bakery, where fresh bread kissed the air with warmth and promise. From that night, a new script began to unfold, one where forgiveness replaced bitterness, and laughter danced alongside cautious hope. Alara's mother, adorned in her finest floral dress, which looked suspiciously like a garden threw up on her, surprised everyone by extending an olive branch, albeit a bit wilted. Maybe we don't have to stay tethered to the heartbreak of our past, like it's a vintage ball and chain, she mused, winking at Aiden's mother, who stood there with a bemused expression, her arms crossed tightly like she was warding off bad juju. And just like that, the atmosphere shifted as light-hearted banter filled the air, punctured by the occasional stifled giggle, proving that old rivalries could be transformed into new friendships with a sprinkle of humor. With the air clearing like a summer storm washing away a sultry day, Alara and Aiden basked in the warmth of newfound acceptance as their families began to mingle. A jovial crowd gathered, sharing stories that danced around the common ground they had yet to explore, their laughter echoing off the village square. It was as if time had stretched its own limits, allowing space for nostalgia and dreams to waltz together. A dance number that was as awkward as any retro dance-off, yet captivating in its own right. The banter between the families flowed like a river of sweet iced tea, a concoction that was both refreshing and a tad tangy, signaling the cautious birth of a hopeful alliance. Somewhere in the background, a raven cawed, perhaps reminding them all that even the most ominous creatures could become part of the dance if they played their cards right. As night fell and the stars began to blink into existence, Alara and Aidan stole a moment away from the wrinkles of their family's histories. Hand in hand, they stood against the backdrop of their village, the tapestry of their story now stitched together with threads of resilience and courage. With secret smiles, they shared dreams of a future unshackled by the chains of age-old misunderstandings. "What if," Aidan said, his voice barely above a whisper, "we become the first generation to rewrite the rules of the game?" Alara grinned, her heart now a canvas of possibilities. Behind them lay the rubble of yesteryears, and ahead, a vibrant horizon brimming with the wild, exhilarating colors of love, in a landscape riddled with the echoes of clashing steel and the pungent scent of smoke. Alara could hardly remember the days when the sun shone unencumbered over Verdantia. Now her world was a slurry of mud and blood, where the air hung heavy with desperation. As a skilled healer, she was more accustomed to tending to the wounds of the living rather than dodging them in the first place. It was during one tumultuous afternoon, with the screams of battle woven into the very fabric of the air, that she stumbled upon Aidan, who looked just as surprised to see her as she was to see him. There they stood, like characters plucked from a romantically tragic novel, caught in a moment that felt like a glitch in reality. A healer and a soldier on the battlefield of despair and chaos, where they should have been enemies, but instead felt an inexplicable connection begin to unfurl like a delicate flower in a storm. Their first encounter was not unlike a scene straight out of a poorly timed rom-com, two star-crossed lovers with very different scripts. Aidan's blue uniform was a stark contrast to the muted greens and browns surrounding them, and Alara could see the glint of confusion in his eyes, as if he were torn between charging into the fray and running away with her to a place far removed from their brutal reality. The cacophony of clashing shields and the distant rumble of cannon fire faded to a dull hum as they exchanged furtive glances, each breath shared feeling heavier, yet lighter at the same time, like being on a roller coaster you never intended to ride. In that hidden alcove, surrounded by both danger and an inexplicable pull towards one another, they shared not just stolen moments, but whispers of hopes and dreams, words stitched together like any fantasy adventure you might find in a dog-eared paperback. As the days turned into weeks, the letters began to flow between them, like lifelines cast across a perilous river separating two worlds. Alara would scribble on scraps of parchment the ink smudged with sweat and the occasional tear, narrating dreams of a peaceful Verdantia, where flowers could bloom without the specter of war. Aidan, on the other hand, sent back rough-hewn notes filled with grit and humor, little quips about how the Morthorian rations could use a chef with a better palate, or how he'd rather face an army on his worst day than be caught in the stampede of a rogue chicken on the fort's farm. The letters danced through the chaos of their lives, the kernel of hope nestled snugly between lines about battle tactics and next-of-kin contact sheets, all whilst they wrote of freedom to love and live beyond the weight of their nation's grudges. Their words took on a life of their own, morphing from simple epistolary exchanges to clandestine poetry composed in the margins of their shared desperation. Occasionally, a breeze would carry the smell of wildflowers into their secret alcove, mingling momentarily with the coppery tang of blood and the zest of damp earth. Every letter became an anchor, tugging at their hearts, pulling them deeper into a bond that defied logic, a romance that wove itself into the tapestry of conflict they were both embroiled in. They smiled in the shadows, finding flickers of joy even as the world around them crumbled like ancient parchment, turning to dust. It was as if they had slipped into a hidden chapter of their lives, where every stolen glance and whispered hope became a note in their symphony of blocked destiny, a sweet irony draped in irony. They were fully aware of the absurdity of it all. After all, war had long been painted as a grandiose struggle for glory, not a secret romance penned in the dark. Yet here they were, two soldiers of fate, bound by a longing that no battlefield could shake. They dreamed of what could be, a realm free from war, where healing wasn't a necessity, but a celebration of life itself. In the interlude of their haunting realities, their letters continued to flutter like moths to a flame, igniting the fragile hope of peace against the backdrop of their enmity. And so, amidst the raging storm of conflict, they penned their story, an unlikely correspondence marked by courage, laughter, and the intoxicating taste of a love that bloomed defiantly beneath the ruins. In the dim shadows of a war-torn landscape, where the stench of gunpowder mixed with the metallic scent of blood, Alara sat by the flickering candlelight, pen trembling in her hand. The scratch of her quill against the rough parchment echoed like whispers in a haunted room. Here, in this precarious haven, she poured her heart into letters addressed to Aidan, the enemy soldier whose station was but a heartbeat away, yet worlds apart. Each ink-streaked line was a lifeline, fingers dancing over vellum, as if they could bridge the chasm of conflict, ignite sparks of passion in the midst of turmoil. If only her heart could drown out the distant booms of cannon fire. After all, Who knew the beauty of love could blossom in such a barren garden of despair? Their letters became a curious routine, an enchanting performance between two distant souls trapped in the entrenched misery of war. Alara would often find herself giggling at Aiden's attempt to make light of their situation, his wit as sharp as the bayonets they both feared. With each exchange, their emotional bond deepened, turning parchment into silk, soft and tender against the harsh discord of the outside world. Yet, irony clung to every word they shared like smoke on the battlefield, their affection entwined with the risk of being discovered, foregone for the turmoil of their divided allegiances. It was as if they were characters in a shoddily scripted war drama, sharing stolen glances through a heavily drawn curtain, while explosions rattled their fragile chaos. As Alara continued her clandestine efforts to communicate, the worrisome tightening of her battalion's scrutiny sent a chill through her heart. When she overheard murmurs of suspicion, her heart drummed like a war horse charging into battle. Her fellow soldiers, now wary of their comrades' secretive demeanor, exchanged knowing glances that pierced through her like arrows. Each stolen moment to write felt like heavy stakes in a game of poker, where any misstep could unveil her treacherous love affair and lead to dire consequences. Could the weight of her longing outweigh the shackles of loyalty? Would a note be worth her life, a high-stakes bet, or a romantic folly immersed in delusion? In the blink of an eye, every rustle of a letter turning into the wrong hands felt like a relentless drumbeat announcing a gathering storm. Alara grew adept at navigating the labyrinthine alleyways of her mind, concocting excuses as elaborate as a Hollywood heist film. Sneaking away from watchful eyes, she became a shadow among shadows, the very embodiment of a romantic hero, battling not just external foes, but also the demons of doubt lurking inside. The smell of wet earth mingled with her rising adrenaline as she found little nooks to bury her correspondence, feeling like some secret agent out of a vintage spy flick. Yet each brush with danger set her pulse racing. Was love truly worth all this? As the war blazed on, the letters became Alara, and Aiden's bright ember in an encroaching darkness, burning fiercely even when the fates conspired against them. Life outside their written world felt like an elaborate circus, filled with clowns and brutality, but the pages whispered tales of normalcy, a walk in a sunlit meadow, laughter over shared meals, and dreams flitting like butterflies. Their words became a lifebuoy as they navigated through the turbulent seas of conflict. The sweet irony never lost on them, that love should flourish amidst ruin. With each heartbeat, they pushed against the encroaching shadows, refusing to be mere caricatures of their uniforms, refusing to allow war to rob them of their humanity. They were lovers in the unlikeliest of places, two unlikely stars blinking defiantly in the glow of an unrelenting battlefield, longing to breach the void that war had etched between them. The air crackled with adrenaline as Aiden's unit rounded up verdant-clad spies, their eyes wild with the fear of betrayal. The camp was a boiling cauldron of tension, each soldier on edge, whispers scattering like leaves in the breeze. Was it a spy's desperate suggestion that led them to push back a border? Or was it misplaced bravery? Amidst the metallic tang of iron from their weapons and the pungent stench of sweat-soaked uniforms, Aiden felt the weight of impending doom settle on his chest like a leaden cloak. Though duty screamed for him to avenge the honor of his land, the specter of Alara haunted his thoughts like a siren's song, beckoning him away from the call of war and deeper into desire. Alara slipped like a shadow through the labyrinthine alleyways of the Verdantian city, her heart pounding a syncopated rhythm against the backdrop of the distant roars of war. She could practically taste the dust in the air as she thought of Aiden, coveted kisses traded beneath the cover of night, now at risk of unraveling with each misstep. With the smell of roasted chestnuts wafting from a nearby vendor, an odd comfort amid the chaos, she pondered the ridiculousness of her situation. It was like a scene from a cheesy romance film, where the lovebirds must surmount an insurmountable wall of disapproval. Only, in their case, that wall was made of sharpened steel and bitter hatred. Each stolen glance and secret smile had unfurled layers of tenderness in her heart. Yet, that very heart also drummed with the fear of discovery, a constant threat of ruin lingering like a dark cloud above. Amidst this web of fear and desire, Aiden, fueled by a reckless blend of courage and desperation, devised a secret plan that could rock the very foundations of the conflict. He knew that risking his own life to meet Alara was tantamount to playing hopscotch on a bed of nails. Yet, the pull of her presence was intoxicating. Maybe it was the heroic music playing in his head, or perhaps the way she made him feel more alive than a vat of Red Bull. But he yearned for an encounter with the girl who turned the enemy's heart into his own war drum. As twilight washed over the world like molten gold, he made his way to their chosen rendezvous, every step crackling with electric anticipation. If only his fellow soldiers were aware, he was slipping off to build bridges instead of barriers. They'd likely roast him alive for getting tangled in such treacherous emotions. The irony would almost be poetic. Their meeting place was a hidden glade, a small sanctuary framed by the scent of damp earth and blooming wildflowers. As Alara stepped forward, moonlight danced upon her features, illuminating the fire in her eyes a blaze that threatened to melt away the chill of animosity that surrounded them. In that moment, amidst the chorus of crickets serenading their clandestine connection, everything shattered. The remnants of duty, of war, drifted away like leaves caught in a gust of wind, leaving only two souls entwined in a chaotic embrace. They shared wordless glances, secretive smiles, and touches that felt like an electric charge, each heartbeat a silent declaration. However, their reality loomed above them, a specter of consequence that threatened to shatter their fragile world one wrong move, and they would both be swallowed whole by the unforgiving tides of loyalty and betrayal. As they sat, the heaviness of their predicament weighed upon them like the stale flavor of week-old bread left to harden on the counter. Their laughter, intertwined with spoken words, though laced with nervousness, were like Romeo and Juliet. But minus the tragic ending, Aidan joked, his voice a blend of bravado and vulnerability, trying to lighten the crushing atmosphere. Alara could only nod, her heart a whirling tempest of hope and fear. Each stolen moment felt like defiance, a playful game of tag with destiny. But the clock was ticking, and fate had an iron grip on their fragile love, with every heartbeat echoing their dual desire for peace. They looked one another in the eye, two warriors trapped in a blessed union, yet bound by the chains of their worlds, awaiting the day they could finally break free. The sun hung low in the sky, casting an amber glow over the scarred landscape where Alara and Aidan dared to meet. They sat hidden beneath the twisted branches of an ancient oak, its gnarled roots clutching at the earth like weary hands. The smell of damp soil and the faint musk of decaying leaves filled the air, an unexpected cloak for their secret rendezvous. Laughter escaped their lips like stolen joys in a war-torn world, a reminder of what they once were, two hearts tethered by invisible threads across enemy lines. But as fate would have it, their serenity was abruptly shattered when the noise of booted feet marched towards them, snapping the fragile peace like a brittle twig. Emerging from the shadows were a band of soldiers, their faces grim and eyes narrowing as they recognized the two lovers entwined in a forbidden dance. Shouts erupted, slicing through the air sharper than any sword, and in that moment, love transformed into survival instinct. Aidan's heart raced as he stood protectively in front of Alara, his pulse pounding like a war drum, echoing the urgency that overwhelmed them. The soldiers advanced like wolves closing in on prey, their weapons raised, and a gust of dread swept through the clearing, chilling Alara to the bone. She felt an electric thrill of fear, but also an undeniable fire within herself, fanned by Aidan's unyielding gaze. Here was the fight for everything they believed in, all wrapped up in the violence of the present. What followed was a blur of fists and feet, the sound of grunts, and clashing metal melding into an infernal symphony. Aiden's movements were fluid yet forceful, each strike a veiled declaration of his love, each dodge a desperate attempt to shield Alara from harm. With every soldier he took down, adrenaline surged through him like high-octane fuel, igniting the flames of rebellion against an unjust world. But amidst the chaos, Aiden felt the weight of a secret, one that could tip the scales of war, pressing against his chest, mingling with his desperation to keep Alara alive. It was like a ticking time bomb nestled between his heart and his resolve, urging him to make a choice that could change everything. As the dust began to settle and the last echo of conflict faded, Aiden turned to Alara, his breath ragged, a conviction burning brighter than ever in his chest. "I know something, Alara," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Something that could end this war. But it would mean risking everything, my life, my safety, and our chance at happiness." Alara's eyes widened, a mixture of fear and fierce determination shimmering like sunlight on a morning dew. They had always been dreamers, lovers bent on defying the odds. And now, against a backdrop of chaos and despair, they could either succumb to the war or challenge it head-on by revealing their truth, a love that crossed borders, defied hatred, and spoke of hope amidst the ruins. In that heartbeat of decision, as the world felt dangerously small around them, Aiden and Alara forged a plan that seemed to defy logic, a tale that could ripple through both their nations like a rock skipping across a placid lake. They envisioned not just a story of passion, but an anthem of peace, a testament that love could flourish, even where flowers had withered. It felt equal parts noble and utterly insane, like trying to convince the Avengers to sit down for tea with Thanos. And so, hand in hand, they vowed to carry their truth into the hearts of their people, hoping that perhaps, just perhaps, their love story could bridge the divide, a spark in a world too often blanketed in darkness. In the quiet aftermath of the fierce clash between their opposing armies, Alara and Aiden found solace in the rhythm of ink meeting paper. Each letter they penned became a lifeline thrown across the churning waters of conflict, a bridge built with words instead of violence. Alara's heart raced, her fingers trembling slightly as she wrote beneath a flickering candle, the scent of wax mingling with the stale air of the war-torn camp. She could almost hear Aiden's laughter in her mind, a distant echo from a world where armies were mere fables and love reigned supreme. Oh, how she longed to trade the stink of gunpowder for the fresh blossoms of spring, a time when hope would flourish instead of decay, like the ruins surrounding her as days stretched into weeks. A strange transformation swept through the ranks of soldiers. Those once eager to march into battle began exchanging glances laden with doubts, as if the weight of Alara and Aiden's letters had replaced the weight of their armor. Whispers of love, both absurd and beautiful, fluttered through the encampments like the fluttering wings of doves, doves that had been conspicuously absent from the battlefield, littered with forgotten dreams. Meanwhile, the blood-soaked earth told stories of loss that now sat uncomfortably alongside the burgeoning tales of a forbidden love. It was the irony of it all that amazed Alara, who knew that two soldiers, members of sworn enemies, could evoke such a profound rebellion against the very nature of war. Amidst the smoke and whispers, a revolutionary idea began to sprout. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way to trade swords for olive branches. As ceasefire talks loomed on the horizon, the scent of burning wood morphed into something less foreboding and more fragrant, a faint glimmer of hope wafting through the camps. Soldiers who had once only known the clatter of metal and the cries of the wounded now shared stories. Laughter spilling out into the night like mischievous children playing under the stars. Alara imagined Aiden amidst this makeshift brotherhood, a wry smile playing on his lips, even as he clung to the fragile threads of courage. They were two souls, mismatched in the grand narrative of history, stitching together a fabric of unity amid the frayed edges of war. As the ceasefire took hold, the air crackled with an anticipation that was almost electric, the tension easing like a breath held too long. The final letter that Alara penned was a tapestry of emotions, a vow wrapped in promises and dreams, carrying the weight of their shared history. In it, she painted a future where children could fly kites on grassy hills instead of dodging bullets in muddy trenches. It was a letter suffused with the spirit of every movie romantic ever cast in their best role, the sweet sound of hearts daring to beat together against the relentless drum of conflict. To the outside world, they were still enemies, but to each other, they had become something more, an unshakable resolve to advocate for a peace built not on fear, but on genuine affection. Their story spread from one beleaguered town to another, electrifying hearts and minds like a surprise cameo in a favorite blockbuster, unexpected and utterly delightful. Aiden and Alara were no longer just characters in an epic tale. They had become symbols of hope, living proof that love has the power to dismantle walls and heal old wounds. As they finalized the words of their last letter, their souls intertwined with every inked stroke, the scent of fresh ink mingling with the aroma of change hung in the freezing air. The battlefields that had once erupted in rage would soon pulse with the laughter of new beginnings, radiant like dawn breaking over the horizon. And who would have thought, amidst the chaos, that a couple of back-and-forth letters could spark a revolution of the heart, notations of affection, rewriting the grim chapters of a history that so desperately needed a new narrative, in the heart of a quaint English village, where the clanging of church bells mingled with the distant echoes of cannon fire. Clara stumbled upon something extraordinary. As she ascended the creaky staircase, with each step sending dust motes swirling in the shafts of sunlight, the attic appeared before her like a forgotten relic itself. Bathed in a golden glow, old trunks lay like slumbering giants, their leather cracked and weary, the musty air thick with the scent of decaying wood and time. It was a treasure trove of yesterday, a place where history whispered secrets, dancing just beyond the edge of her consciousness, or as her uncle might say, as Clara sat on the dusty attic floor, a sunbeam sneaked through a creaky wooden window, illuminating the stacks of forgotten letters that spilled open like a long-lost treasure chest. With each delicate envelope she unfolded, the musty scent of old paper fused with the faint whiff of lavender, Lady Eveline's favorite fragrance. Clara imagined the letters chronicled a romance that set fire to the rigid cords of propriety, binding the upper crust of society. Eveline's scribbles danced across the yellowed pages, revealing not just an affair with Thomas, but the fiery spirit of a woman forged in a time when such flames were meant to be snuffed out faster than a flickering candle in a storm. Clara chuckled softly, thinking of how they might have snuck around like characters in one of those scandalous novels, dodging chaperones as if they were secret agents in a thrilling caper, only to be pursued by the relentless shadow of Eveline's well-off, unsympathetic father. But it wasn't just Eveline's heart that was in turmoil. Clara felt the heat of her own family's heavy expectations pressing down like a pile of woolen blankets on a hot summer day. With a war raging overseas, the stakes were high, and matrimony had suddenly become a strategic game rather than a romantic escapade. Her mother, bless her heart, seemed more obsessed with finding Clara a dapper suitor than ever, as if pleasantries and matchmaker gossip could rejuvenate the world torn apart by shellfire. You wouldn't want to end up a spinster, dear. Clara could almost hear her mother's voice echoing through the dusty air, dripping with well-meaning anxiety. It was like watching a clumsy ballet where all the dancers were out of sync, and Clara felt like she was trapped in the wrong act entirely. As Clara read further, the love letters whispered sweet nothings, but societal whispers erupted like bees from a disturbed hive. Eveline's love for Thomas was flayed open as a scandalous wound, with each line depicting the tightening grip of her father's ambitions, all poised to marry her off to a man who could fill their coffers deeper than love could ever reach. Money and status, the old familiar chains, clinked like the Big Ben clock marking the passage of time. For Evelyn, each minute brought unease, the irony thick enough to cut with a knife. Clara sniffed the air, now laced with the bittersweet scent of rebellion. It felt strangely empowering and utterly terrifying to consider the consequences of one's own desires against the rigid backdrop of society's expectations. Outside the attic, rumors buzzed like a gossipy neighbor's tongue, dragging Clara's parents further into the fray of scandal that plagued the community. They were losing sleep over reputations and social standings rather than the heartaches of their youth. She could hear hushed conversations in the parlor, a distinct undercurrent of disapproval that dripped like water from a faulty roof. The juxtaposition of her modern beliefs colliding with her family's antiquated ideologies was both comedic and tragic, reminiscent of a Shakespearean play where love fights against the absurdity of the world. Clara felt her spirit sink and rise like a soda fountain, 1 minute fizzing with the excitement of possibility, and the next flirting with the flatness of despair. How strange it was that Evelyn's bravery could light the path for her own. Yet here she was, torn between the exhilaration of newfound freedom and the weight of tradition hanging around her neck, making it hard to breathe. In the end, Clara recognized the power of those letters, transforming from mere echoes of the past to fuel for her own battles in the present. It was oddly laughable to think that while war tore the world apart, love seemed to weave a tapestry that challenged every fiber of its existence. Evelyn's unwavering quest for independence resonated within her, battling against the whispers of conformity that shouted, "Be quiet. Stay put." But wasn't that the very essence of love, to be willing to risk it all for tumultuous joy, sweet sorrow, and the delicious irony that life rarely played fair? Clara let out a determined breath, inspired by Evelyn's hidden affair, as she resolved to unveil her own truth amid a world still reeling from the chaos of war. Clara stood at the attic's threshold, the heavy wooden door creaking open like an ominous whisper of secrets. Dust motes danced in rays of slanting sunlight, swirling through the air like tiny specters from another time. Determined to uncover the truth about her ancestor Thomas, Clara felt a chill ripple through her spine, as if the very walls were watching. She had stumbled upon the heart-wrenching news. Thomas, presumed dead after going missing in action, was a specter of love and loss for his beloved Evelyn. A deep ache pulsed in her chest as she thought of Evelyn's despair, a woman left to grapple with an emptiness so profound it could swallow the world whole. like a bad breakup depicted in a black and white film where the melodrama never seems to end. As Clara sifted through piles of yellowed letters and brittle photographs, she caught whispers drifting through the attic. They curled around her ears like tendrils of smoke, just out of reach, hinting at the passionate connection between Eveline and Thomas. Shadows flickered in the corners, transforming into shapes that danced and spun, hinting at stolen glances and quiet, longing touches beneath the stars. Each creak of the old floorboards echoed stories of love defying the constraints of society. As Clara felt an undeniable pull, a visceral connection that made her heart race, she could almost hear the haunting strains of a wartime lullaby, capturing both the rapture and the heartbreak that defined their romance. The soft strains of the kind of music that makes you laugh and cry simultaneously, like a telenovela made for a global audience. With each passing day in the attic, strange occurrences intensified. Clara felt the air thicken with mystery, prickling against her skin like 1,000 tiny needles. She marveled at the contrast between the cozy, weathered feel of the attic and the chilling sense of those lost loves whispering their secrets. The sense of mothballs and old paper mingled with something inexplicably spicy, as if love itself had seeped into the very fabric of the attic. And then there was the overwhelming longing. It rippled through her, resonating with her own burgeoning feelings as she navigated her own awkward entanglements. A comically confusing mix of crushes and misfires that made her feel like she was living in a romantic comedy where everyone was just a little bit hapless. Every shadow seemed to breathe life into Clara's own uncertainties about love. The attic, once a mere storage space for forgotten relics, morphed into a sanctuary for beckoning ghosts of the past. As she pieced together the fragments of Eveline's heartache, Clara began to rethink her own choices in life and love. She felt as if Eveline's spirit had whispered into her heart, urging her to embrace what was real and raw, even if it meant stumbling and fumbling like a toddler with marbles on a polished floor. It was oddly comic, the way Clara's world felt bigger yet smaller, as if Eveline's legacy was the missing puzzle piece in her own chaotic love life. Who knew attic ghosts could play matchmaker? Clara knew she couldn't ignore this pull any longer. The attic was a crucible of emotions, crafting new blends of desire and fear that rushed through her like the wild thrill of a music festival. The poignant truth of Eveline and Thomas's tragic love seeped into her soul, igniting something fierce within her own heart. Perhaps it was time to confront the contradictions in her relationships, those charming but utterly bewildering suitors. With a final glance around the attic, she felt her spirit lifted as if the very essence of Evelyn sat on her shoulder, winking like a mischievous old friend. Clara chuckled softly to herself, the echoes of ghostly laughter mingling with her own as she left, newly inspired to pursue not just the secrets of the past, but the beautiful, messy love stories yet to unfold. In the dim light of dusk, Clara tiptoed along the cobblestone street, heart racing like a horse on a race day. The air was thick with the smell of wet earth and distant gunpowder, a harsh reminder of the war raging beyond her town. She cradled a small bundle of paints and brushes, a secret arsenal against the drudgery of her life. Tonight was special. She was to meet James, a local artist, whose hands were rumored to wield more than just paint. His talent could conjure beauty where only shadows had lived. They shared more than a passion for the arts. They shared an unspoken desire to break free from the confines of a society that felt like a too tight corset, suffocating and oppressive, especially for a woman like her during these dark times. As Clara entered the dimly lit studio, she was greeted by the warm, earthy aroma of turpentine and the lingering sweetness of freshly squeezed lemons, James's odd choice for a painter's snack. There was an enchanted chaos to the place. Canvases leaned precariously, while splatters of paint told stories of their own. James appeared at the far end, a mischievous grin lighting his face, his paint-smeared hands gesturing like a conductor, leading a symphony of colors. They quickly lost themselves in spirited conversations about art and dreams, laughter bubbling up like champagne in their glasses, a rare treat in times of war. In that moment, Clara felt as if she had stepped into an impressionist painting, full of vibrant hues and lively strokes, and she, the muse, reveling in the beauty of the moment. As days turned into weeks, Clara and James found themselves weaving a tapestry of romance, soft whispers painted on a canvas of secrecy. It wasn't until a lingering touch sent a shiver down Clara's spine that she learned the depths of their connection. James unveiled that his grandfather had fought alongside Thomas, her late fiancé, a tale filled with camaraderie and peril that had the weight of history pressing down upon them. It was as if fate had tied their hearts together with an invisible thread, their shared past haunting yet beautiful like the eerie melodies of a ghost choir. Clara's world expanded. She felt the pull of destiny deeply, as if the whispers of history beckoned her to delve deeper into her own soul story. Then came the fateful anniversary of Thomas's presumed death, a day marked on Clara's heart with unyielding pain and bittersweet memories. The clouds hung heavily in the sky, casting shadows that mirrored her own grief. Compelled by a force she couldn't quite name, Clara returned to the attic where echoes of the past lingered like whispers of a long-forgotten tune. As she climbed the creaky steps, the atmosphere thickened, wrapping around her like a fog, more alive than dead. There, amidst forgotten relics, and a musty scent that reminded her of old letters and dusty dreams, she felt the presence of Eveline and Thomas, spectral shapes emerging from the gloom, inviting her to listen to their tale of love and sacrifice. In that fragile moment, the very air crackled with the intensity of their stories, revealing the timelessness of love that could transcend even the darkest of circumstances. Clara understood with stunning clarity that love could be both a comfort and a cruel master. It whispered of joy, yet weighed heavy with loss. Eveline's voice, soft as a lullaby, told her about choice and sacrifice, while Thomas's gaze, filled with a somber wisdom, urged her to honor the love that had once burned so brightly. As the spectral forms began to fade, Clara felt a renewed strength, an empowerment that left her breathless, yet exhilarated, as if she'd just binge-watched a season finale that turned everything she believed upside down. The attic, once a space of haunting sadness, transformed into a sanctuary of hope, echoing back the promise that love, however fleeting, was a canvas worth returning to time and again. As the last remnants of the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with strokes of crimson and lavender, Clara settled into the attic's worn embrace. Dust motes danced in the fading light as she pulled the frayed quilt closer around her shoulders. The fabric, a patchwork of stories, stitched by hands long gone. This was no longer just a forgotten space. It had transformed into a sanctuary, a guardian of secrets held dear, like whispered words exchanged beneath the sighing beams. Clara smiled, feeling the weight of centuries of unfulfilled desires surround her, its warmth a stark contrast to the chill of looming expectations from her time. It was here, enveloped in this cocoon of nostalgia, that she decided to heed the echoes of Eveline and Thomas, to embrace her heart with audacity, and perhaps a touch of reckless abandon. With a determined breath, Clara descended from her attic refuge, ready to confront the world below, a leap of faith on her own terms. She found James, an unsuspecting hero amidst the mundane bustle of life, his hands deep in the grease of mechanical contraptions, grumbling under his breath like a cranky old engine. Clara smirked, her heart racing at the thought of their coming conversation. This was going to be either a romantic comedy or a drama worthy of the silver screen, replete with misunderstandings and longing glances. She strolled over, the scent of the oil mixed with fresh pine filling her nostrils, a reminder that amid the clamor of everyday chaos, an extraordinary tale was about to unfold. James, she began, feeling the words bubble up like soda fizz, sweet and slightly effervescent. I have something important to share. As Clara laid bare her dreams for their future, those wild imaginings of adventure and love mingling in the heady air, it felt like the opening night of a grand opera, dramatic and alive with possibility. She painted vivid pictures of raucous dinners under starlit skies, exploring bustling town fairs, and perhaps even a life of scandal in the heart of Paris, an echo of the reckless lives once lived by Evelyn and Thomas. James, wide-eyed and momentarily forgetting his oily hands, listened intently, his heart doing somersaults as Clara's words washed over him like a gentle tide pulling at the shore. "You want to live boldly," he said incredulously, scratching his head. It was painfully ironic that just moments ago he had been dreaming of a quietly predictable future, a window seat overlooking the cobblestones, ensured by routine and certainty. But Clara's heartfelt vision ignited a spark of rebellion in his chest, making him question everything he thought he knew. As the conversation swayed like the branches of a willow, Clara felt the attic's weight lift from her shoulders and fill her with vibrant energy, as if Evelyn and Thomas were cheering her on, urging her to embrace the audacity of love. The air crackled with newfound possibilities, and for the first time, Clara saw James not just as a partner, but as a co-conspirator in this grand adventure of life. Like Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers dancing their way through vibrant scenes, each step uncertain, but filled with giddy exhilaration. The muffled sounds of life beyond the walls faded, even the locals gossiping about scandalous affairs felt muted against the rhythm of their dreams. "Why not, Clara?" James exclaimed, a grin spreading across his face like Chewbacca with a fresh haircut, a look of sheer delight. With every promise exchanged, they buried the past's heavy chains and began crafting their own story, one infused with the spirit of those who dared to love fiercely. That evening, as darkness enveloped the world outside, Clara and James found themselves back in the attic, not for secrets, but as champions of their own hearts. The luminous moonlight spilled through the dusty window, illuminating the legacy of love surrounding them, filling the space with shimmering hope. Clara inhaled deeply, mingling the scents of forgotten pages and fresh possibilities. They muted every ounce of self-doubt and leaned into that tempting whisper to defy the norms of their time, igniting a promise that shimmered in the twilight. As laughter echoed against the wooden beams, the attic transformed, a symbol of liberation and rebellion, where dreams of the past harmonized with the pulse of a new tomorrow, bold, bright, and blissfully free. In the sun-drenched heart of Varenthia, the air crackled with anticipation as the annual tournament approached. Crowds thronged the stone streets, their voices a cacophony of cheers and jeers that echoed through the marbled halls of the noble houses. On one side stood Sir Cale Arcalan, a knight clad in armor that gleamed like a fresh catch in the evening sun, his reputation as sharp as the sword at his side. On the other, Lady Myra Denaris, fiercely independent and more akin to a tempest than a mere warrior, armed with a battle-hardened gaze that could wither a lesser opponent. The scent of roasting meats wafted from food stalls, mingling with the sharp tang of tension that hung like smoke, hinting at the inevitable clash between these two formidable rivals. It was more than a tournament. It was the arena where hatred blossomed. Yet secretly, something else lurked beneath their scornful surfaces, like a dragon sleeping beneath the bedrocks of their feud. As fate would have it, the tournament brought forth not just the clanging of swords, but also the shadow of proximity that is often a catalyst for change. On the day of reckoning, the vibrant colors of banners flapped fiercely against the azure sky, and cheers echoed louder than angry wasps in summer. Cale and Myra faced each other, their eyes narrowed, holding the weight of their families' legacies on their shoulders. Yet, as they exchanged barbed words, there was an irony in their rivalry. With every cut they aimed at each other verbally, a spark ignited in their hearts. The crowd was oblivious, roaring for blood and glory, blissfully unaware that beneath the helmets and heavy cloaks, two souls were weaving a tapestry of conflict mixed with an intoxicating allure. Much like a rom-com where enemies discover a shared love for pizza in the midst of chaos. In the melee of the tournament, the clang of swords rang out in a symphony of violence and valor, and each stroke hid behind it a dance of fate. Cale swung his sword, the sunlight glinting off its edge like a mischievous wink, while Myra in her elegant armor dodged and weaved, the leather creaking as if applauding her every agile move. The crowd gasped. The tension was thick enough to slice through with a dull knife. With each successful parry, with each breath shared in close quarters, the realization dawned what they despised in each other was just a reflection of their own fierce spirits. It was a cruel twist of fate, like a Shakespearean comedy where adversaries gradually morph into something far more complex, perhaps allies or lovers, or even the protagonists of an unexpected love story. Would they continue to fight, or would they embrace what lay just beneath skin-deep animosity? The tournament climaxed, and in a moment that felt both timeless and fleeting, Cale and Myra found themselves standing breathless but unyielding, swords locked in a stalemate of strength and willpower. It was as if the world around them faded, leaving only the two of them to wrestle, not just for victory, but for a truth that trembled in the air. close enough to catch the scent of sweat and freshly baked bread from the nearby vendor. The buzz of the crowd faded, replaced by the rapid beat of two hearts sinking in unison, a rhythm that spelled both fear and fierce longing. Cale's heart pounded violently, and all he could think was how curious it was that amongst the clang of metal and the echo of heritage, he found himself drawn to the very essence of his perceived enemy. Could this rivalry that felt so righteous transform into something as bittersweet as a half-baked love potion, waiting to bubble over? As the day wore on, the tournament drew to a close, but the raw tension between Cale and Myra had only begun to unravel. With each victorious duel, a wink of vulnerability surfaced, confusing the definition of their enmity. The once clear boundaries between them began to melt away, like the wax from a candle, revealing the illumination of a shared fate. The grit of competition transformed into the gravity of unspoken emotions, leading them to question if their hatred had been merely a cover-up for something deeper, a connection forged in the fires of rivalry, hot enough to ignite a passionate romance. Who knew that love could bloom amidst bloodshed? In the shadows of Varenthia, amidst duelists and dreamers, two rivals stood on the precipice of something utterly enchanting, ready to turn the page on a romance that would leave a mark on their families and their hearts forever. The sun hung high above the bustling tournament grounds, casting a golden glow over the arena, where tension buzzed like a swarm of angry bees. Cale, with his dark hair slicked back and eyes glinting like sharpened daggers, strutted through the crowd, reveling in the thrill of competition. Opposite him, Myra stood tall, her fiery red locks cascading like a waterfall of flames, each strand shimmering with determination. The air crackled with electricity as their teams, eager for glory, cheered and shouted, fueled by the sweet scent of roasted meat and the earthy aroma of the nearby ale carts. It was clear the rivalry was heating up, and neither was willing to budge an inch. After all, they were in the spotlight, and there was no room for weakness in the arena of champions. Not even a hint of it. But oh, the irony of it all. In the midst of chaos and competition, fate had a peculiar sense of humor. One moment, they were skillfully maneuvering through challenges and hurling sharp quips at one another, much like characters in an epic fantasy movie, with tension thicker than a heroic soundtrack. The next, destiny drew its curtain when a stranger's elbow knocked Cale's drink all over Myra, just outside the arena. Watermelon juice splattered like a tragic accident in a slapstick film, eliciting a sound of surprise and laughter from the gathering crowd. Stained, flustered, and for once devoid of their usual bravado, the two rivals found themselves stepping into a different realm, one where swords of camaraderie and arrows of vulnerability pierced their armors, revealing deeper truths that lay buried beneath their competitive facades. It was a moment charged with quiet intensity. The universe held its breath, while Kale and Myra exchanged glances that spoke volumes, words without sound. They shuffled away from the prying eyes of their teammates, an unspoken agreement forming like clouds before a storm, away from the clamor of adoring fans, beneath the leafy boughs of an ancient oak tree that had weathered countless battles. They found a secret sanctuary. The summer breeze danced around them, carrying whispers of their hopes and fears like the soft notes of a melancholic tune. Here, they dared to share their aspirations, dreams of glory flickering like stars, tinged with regrets that hung heavier than their battle-worn armor. Yet, amid the warmth of their newfound connection, a storm brewed within each of them. Kale, with the weight of family expectations upon him, felt torn like a character caught in a ridiculous love triangle worthy of a teen drama. Myra, the headstrong warrior, desperately wanted to break free from the shackles of rivalry, but loyalty clung to her like a damp cloak. Each heartbeat echoed like a drum, thumping to the rhythm of their conflicting desires. One moment tempted by the allure of love, the next gripped by the fear of betrayal. They exchanged nervous laughter, realizing how absurd it was to feel such warmth in the clutches of rivalry. Like two superheroes caught in a romantic comedy adrift from their epic quests. With every secret meeting under the flickering stars, their connection deepened like roots, intertwining beneath the soil of their rivalry. They met in shadowed corners, exchanging daring smiles that outshone the torches flickering around them. The thrill of hiding their bond added a sweet spice to their encounters, each stolen moment pulsating with adrenaline, further blurring the line between love and rivalry. As the tension in the arena flared, their hearts raced, knowing they were risking everything, perhaps a brotherhood, perhaps a friendship. The world outside could burn with expectations and judgments, but deep within the clash of swords and cheers of glory, they found a sanctuary in each other's embrace amidst the chaos, ready to cherish what fate had unexpectedly woven together. In the dim light of the moon, Kale and Myra met in the old, abandoned mill on the fringes of their warring families' territories. The air was thick with the scent of damp wood and the distant sound of owls hooting, creating a symphony of secrecy that echoed their concealed hearts. As Kale caught sight of Myra, a spark ignited in his chest, electrifying the very air they breathed. They were rivals by day, exchanging barbs sharp enough to cut, but beneath that rivalry lay a pulsing current of unspoken affection. If only their families realized how fast they were not just building a secret romance, but also a storm ready to unravel all they knew about loyalty and honor. They might just send in the cavalry, like in a romantic comedy gone horribly awry, complete with comedic misunderstandings and epic family showdowns. Yet, while youthful passion twirled around them like confetti at a New Year's party, the looming shadow of their family's feud hung heavy. Cale's father, a man with a jaw set in stone, began to notice his son's skittish behavior, his furtive glances towards the mill like a moody teen waiting for their crush's text. Meanwhile, Myra's mother, with her hawk-like instincts and broomstick charm, had sniffed out the scent of betrayal wafting from her daughter. The tension crackled in the air like the aftermath of a fireworks display, bright yet fleeting, and definitely not safe. It was a classic case of who can keep a secret better, where the stakes were high, and the prize was a love that felt more like burying a treasure under layers of family expectations than finding a winning lottery ticket. As days turned to nights and nights folded back into days, Cale felt the crushing weight of duty descend upon his shoulders like an anvil of lead. He wanted nothing more than to run off into the sunset with Myra, but his name was attached to the legacy of a fierce clan that wore their grudges like a badge. Each secret rendezvous became a bittersweet recipe, a blend of warm laughter and biting dread that simmered in his soul. The thrill of stolen kisses was like savoring the hottest chili pepper, exhilarating, yet undeniably risky. Meanwhile, his constant worry of being found out hung over him like a dark cloud during picnic season, threatening to rain on their love parade at any moment. Ensuring their secret felt more like a high-stakes dance than a cozy snuggle under a blanket. On the other side of their clandestine affair, Myra wrestled with her own demons, society's expectations pinning her like a butterfly on a collector's board. The whispers of her family echoed in her mind, a relentless chorus warning against the foolishness of love, against the backdrop of age-old feuds. What would happen if they were caught? Her heart thudded violently against her ribcage at the thought, and visions of familial outrage, flying furniture, not so tactful letters, and perhaps even a standoff worthy of a spaghetti western flooded her mind. Yet, as she stood beside Cale, the world seemed to shrink to just the two of them, their ignored rivals in the grand stage of life, while the crew of family drama awaited to pull the curtain on their ill-fated romance. It was the most profound love story jacketed in absurdity, where a mere glance could ignite a riot, and full-hearted conversations could bring empires crumbling like a hastily built sandcastle by the tide. With the clock ticking, their families plotted grand confrontations, laying traps woven from suspicion and determination, with each side puffing their chests like peacocks strutting for a prize. Kale and Myra found themselves caught in a tempest, each heartbeat a plea for sanity amidst the chaos of impending fate. And love felt more like an illicit affair than the idyllic romance sung about in ballads. As the sun set and shadows grew darker, the echoes of footsteps signaled that the reckoning was near, a showdown like no other. Promises on the line and hearts at stake. Their love danced precariously between fear and desire. As they tried to balance the bright future they envisioned together against the dark storms brewing in their families' hearts. And as they clasped hands one last time, fate lurked nearby, grinning like the Cheshire Cat, eager to see the chaos that would almost certainly ensue. The sun hung high in the sky like an unblinking eye, casting its relentless gaze upon the arena, where the scent of sweat and iron mingled in the sweltering heat. Two rival families stood across from each other, like opposing armies on the eve of battle, their faces painted with grim determination and a touch of madness. Kale and Myra, their hearts pounding as if in a race of their own, found themselves caught in this tumultuous wave of enmity. With swords clashing and murmurings spreading like wildfire, the atmosphere crackled with tension thicker than a fog on a cold morning. They were no longer mere adversaries in a petty feud. They were bound by a fervent love that dared to defy the very fates that brought their families to this ireful moment. Irony dripped from the skies, for here were two hearts meant to be together, now facing off in an arena bred for blood and glory. As the first clash of blades rang out, the sound echoed like a modern-day heavy metal concert, sharp, jarring, and tantalizingly chaotic. Kale, with his fierce determination painted across his chiseled features, found himself facing Myra, feeling an odd mix of pride and agony. With each swing of her sword, he noticed how the light caught her fiery hair, turning even the most violent of gestures into a dance that was both mesmerizing and tragic. The scent of burnt leather clung to the air as swords scraped against one another, sending sparks flying like the 4th of July. This feels like the worst episode of a reality show I've ever been dragged into, Kale thought, as the thought of sacrificing his life for a less than perfect narrative filled him with both humor and despair. Yet amid the din of clanging metal and the frenzied cries of onlookers, there blossomed an unshakable bond between the two lovers. They moved together as if choreographed, each thrust and parry articulating a story that was far deeper than the conflict brewing around them. Myra's eyes locked onto Kale's, a fierce determination sparking within their depths, as if they were sharing a secret that transcended this duel of fates. With every strike, every evasive maneuver, they mirrored their commitment to one another, an almost comical irony that made two sworn enemies behave like partners in a surreal dance of life and risk each time their blades clashed. It was like they were simultaneously trying to cut through the very fabric of the rivalry that sought to tear them apart. Daring to defy destiny, they made the choice to shield each other, drawing gasps from the crowd as they intertwined their bodies and blades, forming a strange but beautiful barrier against the chaos surrounding them. Emotions surged: love, fear, hope swelling within the pit of their stomachs, as Kale whispered urgent promises amid the swordplay. Want to tell them we're just in it for the dramatic irony? He smirked, feeling the weight of the blades pressing upon their secret. It was a moment suspended in time, a heartbeat where nothing else mattered but one singular truth. Love could vanquish hatred, or at the very least, lead to some seriously awkward family dinners. And as the arena swirled with confusion, they made their intentions clear. A tableau of defiance against an age-old feud. And so, with the clamor of the crowd echoing like a chorus from the heavens above, Kale and Myra stepped together into the light of revelation. They dropped their weapons, as if shedding the burdens of their families, allowing the ethereal glow of their love to shine through, gleaming brighter than any sword could. The gasps of astonishment blended with murmurs of disbelief as the rivalry, once a churning sea of animosity, now stood at the precipice of a new dawn. Feelings erupted like popcorn in a microwave, loud and explosive, as onlookers grappled with the sight of love fighting its way through blood-stained history. And with laughter bubbling up through the turmoil, they realized this wasn't just a duel of fates, but the audacious birth of a new legacy, one where love had finally claimed its rightful victory over fate's cruel hand. In the quiet aftermath of the duel, a thick tension hung in the air like an overripe fruit ready to drop. The dust of the field, still swirling from the clash of blades, settled reluctantly on the hearts of those who gathered, their eyes wide and mouths agape. Kale and Myra stood before their families, two luminous figures amidst a cloud of disbelief. Just like a scene straight out of a romance novel, they clasped hands, defying the bitter histories that threatened to drown them. The gasps from both the Archelans and the Daenerys echoed like thunderclaps, punctuating the stillness. Who could have imagined that the bitter rivalry between their clans might crumble under the weight of a love so fierce? It could put even Shakespeare's tragedies to shame. Whispers of shock rippled through the crowd, mingling with the scent of damp earth and fresh tears. An elderly Daenerys, who had seen more duels than a pirate in a bar fight, muttered, "I've seen many a folly in my day, but love, this is new." Meanwhile, Kale's mother fanned herself with a lace handkerchief, her age-old grievances colliding with disbelief. and a hint of grudging admiration. Myra's grandmother, clutching her family's heirloom necklace, narrowed her eyes, not quite ready to toss aside decades of simmering hatred for a pair of star-crossed lovers. It was as if two lighthouses found themselves illuminating the same rocky shores, both guiding ships safely away from the stormy seas of enmity. And there they stood, hearts pounding like war drums, ready to face the night ahead together, against all odds. As the initial shock morphed into simmering curiosity, the grounds began to smell differently. The sweet fragrance of potential began to lighten the air. The clash of swords faded into distant memory as Kale and Myra emerged as symbols of hope. Love, like an unquenchable flame, igniting the spirits of their lineage. Families once drenched in animosity began to peer at one another through a new lens, exchanging glances that sparked a renegotiation of feuds and filled the air with unexpected laughter. Perhaps an Arcalan's suggested, tentatively voice, quaking like a new recruit in the army. We can account for each other's barbecue recipes and settle this once and for all. The irony of using the age-old weapon of meat, smoked in the name of diplomacy, did not escape anyone's notice. Humor finds its way even through the thickest walls of hatred. Emboldened by the winds of change, Kale and Myra took it upon themselves to break down the barriers that had long divided their families. Like a spirited game of Jenga, with life-sized expectations, they organized picnics that burst into life like the 4th of July, where both families mixed and mingled, begrudgingly sharing past grievances that tasted more like sour grapes than fine wine. One could almost hear the strains of triumphant music punctuating the air as dull conversations about creaky joints and kitchen herbs evolved into boisterous debates about who made the best stew. It was in those moments, amidst laughter and the aroma of spiced meats, that old wounds began to heal, revealing the surprisingly tender fabrics of shared humanity beneath the years of enmity. Like the fabled phoenix rising from the ashes, love lit a brand new flame, one that shimmered with the promise of understanding rather than strife. As days turned into weeks, something profound began to unfold, an awakening of sorts. Kale and Myra became accidental matchmakers and peace ambassadors, all while navigating the ups and downs of their secret romance. The echo of their laughter mingled with the harmonious camaraderie of their families, proving that love could indeed bridge the deepest chasms. Together, they forged a new legacy, stitching together the fragmented histories of their clans with threads of compassion and hope. As dawn broke over the verdant hills each morning, it washed the world anew, a reminder that in love's embrace, rivalries could wither, like vines unshackled from their thorny confines. who knew love could be a superpower. Kale quipped one evening, as they watched their families, no longer enemies, but companions, converge around a shared sunset, peace finally wrapping them in its warm, fuzzy blanket, in the heart of a city that could have doubled as a set for a dystopian film, swirling with the smoke of recent protests. Young Isadora stumbled upon a hidden treasure, tucked beneath a loose floorboard in her late father's study. The air was thick with the smell of damp wood and lingering incense, remnants of quiet evenings spent in search of peace. As she pried open the diary's leather cover, it crackled as if awakening from a long slumber, and revealed pages yellowed with time, filled with her father's elegant handwriting dancing nervously across the paper. Each stroke felt like a hidden echo of the past, whispering secrets long buried beneath her family's legacy. The weight of the diary in her hands pulsed with an energy she could almost taste, a connection bridging generations, promising to ignite her own dormant passion for change amidst the chaos of her city's streets. As Isadora delved deeper into the ink-stained pages, she found herself swept away by the tales of her father's struggles. The nights spent plotting in candlelit rooms, the tension of hushed voices rallying against tyranny, punctuated only by the distant roar of a city on the brink. His triumphs, however small, soared like rebellious fireworks against the backdrop of oppression, igniting her heart with an insatiable desire to follow in his footsteps. And there it was, the revelation that sent shivers down her spine, a secret love that intertwined with his revolutionary fervor, adding a bittersweet note to an already tumultuous symphony. Amidst duty and desire, she envisioned her father, a hero with a heart drawn to the fire of rebellion and the warmth of a clandestine romance, who knew freedom could come with such passion, the irony of it all fighting for liberty, while bound by the complexities of the heart, made her chuckle softly, even as fierce determination coiled within her like a tightly wound spring, just waiting to be set free. With each page she turned, the diary breathed new life into Isadora, wrapping her in a shroud of courage woven from the fabric of her father's dreams. She could almost hear the clamor of passionate debates that had inspired her father to rise and stir, the clinking of teacups in smoky cafes, the rattle of an old typewriter as manifestos took shape. Outside, the sounds of rebellion echoed off skyscrapers, sirens wailing like banshees, newsprint flapping in the wind, her city alive with both peril and possibility, a world painted in sharp contrasts of shadow and light, where fear danced alongside brave defiance, beckoning her to join the fray. It felt surreal, like living within the pages of a novel where every protagonist was a free spirit. Yet she found herself uplifted, hanging on her father's every word like she was binge-watching a new series, far too thrilling to pause. As night draped its dark cloak over the city, Isadora felt the weight of her decision pressing on her chest, a live wire of exhilaration and anxiety. The revelation from the diary, nestled like a dormant seed in her heart, sprouted with each heartbeat. She would not just read about revolution, she would become a part of it. With her father's passion echoing in her own soul, she slipped out into the cool night air, the remnants of day clinging to her skin like ghosts, the scent of rebellion, the smoke of fires burned, and the metallic bite of blood on alley pavements filled her lungs, invigorating her spirit like a powerful cup of coffee laced with the promise of danger. If her father could sway fate with nothing but his pen and passion, then surely she could wield more than just a diary. She could carry the torch of revolution into uncharted territories, rallying her own tribe to rise against the shroud of oppression. With a fierce glint of newfound resolve sparking in her eyes, Isadora raced through the streets, heart pounding a rhythm of rebellion, the echoes of her father's life singing encouragement through her veins. She could feel the pulse of her ancestors beneath her feet, guiding her steps along cobblestone paths like a mystical GPS. Each corner turned, leading her closer to an awakening far greater than she ever anticipated. The disco lights of the city's nightlife flickered in defiance, mirroring her own rebellious spirit, while heavy fog swirled around her like a fashionable cape of anonymity. She was no longer just a young woman who had lost her father to the shadows of history. She was Isadora, the daughter of a revolutionary and a burgeoning revolutionary herself, ready to pen her own chapters in the fierce saga of freedom. For within the heart of a tumultuous city, she was fueled by love and forged in fire, ready to unveil a legacy that demanded to be lived, not merely read. As Isadora turned the brittle pages of her father's diary, a musty scent wafted up, mingling with her growing anxiety. Each stroke of his pen vibrated with feverish fervor, recounting secret meetings in dimly lit taverns where revolutionaries whispered like moths to the flame. She could almost hear the clinking of glasses and hushed conspiracies floating through the air like smoke. But betrayal loomed larger than the shadows of her father's past. It was woven through every line, leaving a bitter taste that threatened to choke her. This was not the heroic tale she had envisioned, but rather a complex web of dreams and despair, leaving her wondering if ignorance truly was bliss. The city outside her window pulsed with unrest, the distant sound of shouts and clashing metal layering a heavy blanket of tension in the air. Isadora felt like a ghost wandering through a waking nightmare, her heart thudding against her ribs like an overenthusiastic drummer at a rock concert. Everywhere she looked, she saw the rising tide of rebellion, people clawing for freedom, while her father's decisions echoed like a haunting melody in her mind. Each encounter with the city's growing uprising was a dance of danger, and it didn't take long for her to learn that every revolutionary's song was laced with discordant notes of betrayal and sacrifice. Caught between the past and the present, Isadora felt a burgeoning fire ignite within her, a fire lit by love for her father, and a stubborn resolve to honor his legacy. She knew she had to tread the brittle line between loyalty and justice. And as she masterfully navigated this treacherous path, she could feel the eyes of both allies and foes watching her every move. The whispers of her father's betrayal echoed in her mind, reminding her that trust could be as slippery as a soap bar in a prison shower. But with each courageous step into the fray, those whispers began to turn into rallying cries. She wasn't just her father's daughter, but a revolutionary in her own right, armed with determination and a secret weapon, her burning heart. In seedy back alleys and raucous gatherings, Isadora sought allies like a pirate hunting buried treasure, scouring for souls who shared her vision of liberation. Among the crowd, she stumbled upon eccentric characters whose stories sparkled brighter than a well-placed disco ball, with a flamboyant juggler who claimed to know the emperor's secrets, and an old blacksmith with enough grit to rival an army of warriors. The air crackled with excitement and possibility, laced with the bitterness of the regime's iron grip. As laughter mingled with the smell of sweat and unwashed clothes, Isadora felt a strange kinship, bonding over the shared grief of loss, echoing the ineffable truth that even in darkness, light could still spring forth from the hearts of the oppressed. Despite the swirling chaos and the stakes rising higher than a tightrope walker on a caffeine high, Isadora remained determined. The city's unrest mirrored her own turmoil, a cocktail of hope and fear swirling inside her, making her feel as alive as a horror movie's final girl. As she folded the diary closed for the night, the moonlight illuminated her father's words like a beacon, guiding her through the storm. With clenched fists and the spirit of the revolution coursing through her veins, she stepped onto the battlefield, not just to fight for her father's legacy, but to carve out her own destiny amidst the shadows of the past. The game was afoot, and Isadora was ready to claim her place in history. Come what may, the sun blazed above the city, casting long shadows on cobblestone streets slick with the remnants of yesterday's rain. Isadora stood amidst the throng of eager youth, their faces a blend of defiance and determination, reminiscent of lions ready to pounce if lions wore tattered clothes and had very little idea where to find a good steak. Her heart raced as she readied herself to unleash her father's revolutionary ideas. Ideas as potent as the freshly torn pages of his diary, holding the secrets of a movement that could very well shake the iron grip of the authorities. "We rise together," she shouted, her voice ringing out like a clarion call, slicing through the haze of doubt that clung to her like a second skin. The crowd erupted in cheers, buoyed by the promise of change, under the skeptical gaze of a distant guard, already itching for their clubs and shields like a kid eager for recess. Days bled into nights, each filled with fervor as they organized protests that felt like thunderstorms brewing on a clear day, the tension crackling in the air, so thick you could practically cut it with a knife. Flyers fluttered in the wind, sharing her father's vision with slogans so catchy they made you want to dance or throw a brick through a window, depending on your politics. The smell of burnt wood from makeshift fire pits mingled with the scent of sweat and ambition. Crowded spaces buzzed like a beehive disturbed by an intruder. With every chant and shout for justice that echoed through the city, the spirit of rebellion surged, and even the pigeons seemed to pick up the vibe, cooing their support, until they inexplicably dropped their contributions on unsuspecting hats. But beneath the bravado, fear slithered in like a snake ready to strike. Isidora's nights were plagued with shadows. Doubts whispered in her ear, reminding her of the stakes at play. Her own father's life a testament to the potential costs. His words, once comforting, now raced through her mind like a runaway train, urging her toward action, yet reminding her of the perilous path ahead. What if I fail? She thought, her heart pounding harder than a heavy metal drum solo at a battle of the bands. No safety net, just the raw edge of risk. The clash of helmets rang out in the distance, a grim reminder that the authorities were more than just a few guys in funny hats. They were a wall of resistance, ready to turn protests into riots faster than you could say, "Occupy Wall Street." One fateful evening, with torches flickering like beacons of hope against the encroaching darkness, Isadora found herself on the front line. Banners waved overhead, colors blending in a chaotic celebration of unity. Yet the tension crackled like a late-night infomercial. You knew it was just a matter of time before something outrageous happened. The chants morphed into war cries as they faced off against the line of uniformed figures, their expressions an eerie mix of assurance and dread. The air hung heavy with the smell of uncertainty, a cocktail of sweat, smoke, and something else, adrenaline, perhaps, or the irony that they were fighting for a future that might cost them this very present. It was a moment steeped in drama, like a final scene in a blockbuster thriller. Except this was very real and very scary. not the least bit scripted. As conflict erupted, fear transformed into fierce resolve, an alchemical change as potent as any potion from a fantasy film. Adrenaline flooded her veins, while her father's diary, her compass, in a storm, mapped the way forward. She advanced, not just for herself, but for everyone who longed to breathe freely, for the voices stifled in the clamor of oppression. The roar of the crowd swelled like the bass in a dance club, and Isadora felt the weight of history pushing her forward, nudging her into the fray. There, amid the chaos, she found clarity. The once loathsome doubt became fuel for her fire, igniting a passionate rebellion that could very well become the stuff of legends. If only they could emerge on the other side, alive and unbroken, in the heart of the city, where cobblestones whispered tales of struggle and resilience. The square transformed into a vibrant battlefield, painted with the colors of rebellion. Banners fluttered like wild birds, and the air crackled with anticipation, thick with the scent of sweat and the metallic tang of unrest. Voices rose above the thrumming heartbeats of a restless crowd, echoing promises of change that felt almost palpable, like the tension before a storm. Isadora stood at the forefront, eyes shining with fierce determination, though a nervous flutter danced in her stomach, a reminder that hope can sometimes taste bitter, especially when you're charging headfirst into chaos, like a character from a rebellious teen drama, ready to defy the odds. But the whirlwind of joy turned into a tempest of betrayal when a face she thought she could trust revealed its true colors. A fellow revolutionary, once warm with camaraderie, broke like a cheap plastic toy under pressure and unraveled his secret allegiance to the regime. The shock hit Isadora like a splash of cold water, dragging her from the heights of euphoria to the depths of despair. Everywhere she looked, the glimmer of hope was suddenly overshadowed by shadows creeping through the throng, dark tendrils of fear snaking their way into the hearts of her comrades. How could her fight for freedom become draped in such treachery? Like a beloved movie, ending with the hero inexplicably turning villain. In that chaotic moment, as her comrades struggled to comprehend the betrayal, Isadora felt the world tilt beneath her feet like a teetering stack of precarious blocks. She heard the distant clanging of bells, ringing not of victory, but of warning, each toll pounding in her chest like a war drum. The scent of smoke surged around her, mingling with the remnant sweetness of the festival that had quickly soured, reminding her all too vividly of the thin line between celebration and destruction. Heart racing, she weighed her options with the clarity of a soldier at the brink, grappling with the heavy decision of whether to plunge deeper into the fray or retreat to protect those she loved like a mother bear, shielding her cubs from danger. As she stood on the precipice of doubt, a chill weaved through her thoughts, pulling her back to moments spent with her father, those nights wrapped in warmth and stories of heroism, delivered in voices hushed with reverence. His spirit whispered through her, urging her, "Remember why you fight. This is for their freedom too." The memory ignited a fire inside her, lighting her path through the murky fog of uncertainty. In an instant, she was reminded that love and courage often lay intertwined, and sometimes taking a risk was the only way forward, like a daring leap off the high dive into the unknown. With newfound resolve coursing through her veins, Isadora rallied her comrades, her voice ringing like a clarion call through the smoky haze. Drawing strength from the memories that shaped her, she charged back into the melee, a whirlwind of fierce hope puncturing through the darkness. The battleground roared with life, each heartbeat a reminder of the struggle that lay ahead, which she now faced not as a solitary fighter, but as a beacon for her people. Together, they moved as one, a furious tidal wave ready to crash against the walls of oppression, each of them believing, even in this moment of uncertainty, that the promise of freedom was just within reach. The battle was set to unfold not only against a regime, but within pitiless hearts, and with each step, she knew they would write their own legacy, one that would echo through time like a beloved film that never truly ends. The dawn broke over the city, a weary soul stretching its limbs after the turmoil of the uprising. Isadora stood at her window, inhaling the sharp, earthy scent of damp cobblestones as the mist clung to the air like a forgotten ghost. She could still hear the echoes of shouts, the clash of metal, and the urgent cries for freedom. But today, she felt a different kind of noise humming, a low, vibrating pulse of hope. It thrummed through the streets where her father once tread, now filled with fellow revolutionaries hungry for change and the warmth of healing. Like the first rays of sunlight spilling onto a darkened room after a long, stormy night. With a heart full of purpose, Isadora gathered a group of men and women, each bearing the fire of shared struggles in their eyes. They met in the old library, dust motes dancing in the sunbeams, much like their aspirations flickering in the face of adversity. The air was thick with the aroma of old paper and ink, reminding Isadora of long-forgotten stories filled with heroism and sacrifice. As she shared her father's diary, a tattered relic that dripped with blood, sweat, and dreams, it ignited a spark in the room. They were no longer just fragments of a broken city. They were the resurrection of dreams, now united under a banner of peace and reform, like a superhero team gathering for a showdown against the forces of complacency. Days turned into weeks, and the diary transformed into a talisman of hope, a beacon that pulled the fractured city towards a common goal. Bright murals, splashed across once grimy walls, reflected the stories of pain and resilience, creating vibrant testimonies of life after the storm. Isadora could almost hear the colors chirping like birds, singing songs of a new era where laughter mingled with the clang of tools refining their battered streets. Even the local baker found joy in crafting pastries shaped like peace doves, their sweet aroma wafting through the air, tantalizing the once-kept citizens as they gathered to dream of a life beyond strife. With each bite, they savored something more than sugar. They tasted the revolution brewing in their hearts. As Isadora served as the face of change, the community began to embrace her father's vision, transforming their pain into purpose. She often found herself in town squares, addressing crowds that swelled like the tides, hearts beating in sync with hers. A mix of hope and hilarity danced in her words as she joked about their struggle, saying, "We're not just fixing broken streets, we're building pathways to people's hearts." The crowd erupted in laughter, breaking down the walls of fear and doubt that once divided them. It was in those moments, beneath the fluttering flags of their newfound unity, that Isadora could feel her father's spirit swirling around them, whispering sweet nothings of courage. With the passing of time, stories of their past struggles blended into parables of triumph, and Isadora swore to keep her father's legacy alive. She would see to it that each heart touched by the revolution carried a piece of his dream, an everlasting ember that would never dim. The city, once shadowed by despair, now sparkled with newfound hope, as if each brick gleamed with a promise for tomorrow. As she walked through the now bustling streets, Isadora savored the mingled scents of fresh bread, bright flowers, and laughter, a bouquet of healing. She knew the world was still fraught with challenges, but together they were stepping into a legacy, forging not only in honor of the fallen, but in the heartbeat of every individual, united by their shared story and the dreams that lay ahead.